Hello everybody, in the last tutorial we talked about asynchronous workflow that could do some stuff without interrupting the other processing. So in this tutorial, I'm gonna show how we actually make a request asynchronous to fetch the data, and we do that by making HTTP request. First of all, what is AJAX and what are the advantages of using this? So basically AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and the XML that allow us to send a request and retrieve the data from the server. Thus by making HTTP requests to get the data without reload the web page. By the word AJAX, we can see that it works asynchronously, and the XML here is the type of the data response, but mostly we're gonna see the data in a JSON format instead of this day. Now we can make those network requests via the API endpoints, and these endpoints is just like a URL, and we can use those to get the data or submit the data to the server. For example, when we're gonna view the Facebook web page, post or like a comment, did you notice that when you do some kind of actions, scroll down the new feed or just hit the like on some photo, comments on something like that, and yes, you know, the data is already on the server, but how can it talk to the server silently and it's not refreshing the page? And that is probably going to be using AJAX HTTP request to update the new feed content without reload the whole page. So let's say in the browser, if I open up the Facebook website and if I see an interesting post, then I just hit the click like button. And then it's gonna reload the whole page once again. So what do you think in this case? That would be a terrible user experience, right? And now let's see another example. We want to get a data video list from the YouTube, and the YouTube is provide the endpoint, which is something like this. When we making the request to these endpoints, would return a list of video. So in our code, would make a network request to the server endpoint. Then the server will see this request and say, okay, let's find a matching URL API, something like that. So if the server found the endpoints, the server will return the data as a response. And then we're gonna get the data in our code, so we can use the data as a result. And there are many different APIs that we can use to get the data, such as Facebook, Instagram, Google Maps, and lots more. For each of those platforms, they have their own batch of endpoint URLs. And you also could make your own APIs too, by using the server-side languages like PHP, C# or Python and more. Okay, for those we can make the network request to the endpoints from our code, and we usually get back the data as a format in JSON text. And JSON is a format which have the key value pairs that really look like a JavaScript objects, and we're gonna talk this soon later on. And now let's have a look how we can make that HTTP request. Here is the website that we're going to use for practice with. And this website is really awesome and completely free service for testing fake API endpoints. Now, if we go down here, we can see the list of the endpoints that we can play around with it. If I click here, the website is gonna make the network request, and then it's gonna be respond a single user display in here. And this result really look like a JavaScript object, and this kind of data is returned from the server side. Now, if you go to the inspect elements by pressing Ctrl+Shift+I in Chrome and go to the network tab over here, and then we click on this once again to make the network request. When we click on that, the web page doesn't refresh or reload the web page, means that I can talk to the server silently. Okay, now we're gonna see these things listed down over here, and these things are the network request. And right here we can see the network methods is get. So when we want to get the data from the server, we make a get request. But it depends on what you implement on the server side. For getting the list of the data, it does not make sense if you use another method request beside the get request. Anyway, we can see the column type here in the XHR, which is come from the objects of the XML HTTP request. And that's if we're gonna use the request data in the future. If you click on this, we're gonna see the information about the network request. And if you go to the response tab, we're gonna see the data that respond back. And now we're gonna make the network request with this API from our JavaScript code. So we can do something with that data response, like a render in the dynamic HTML element, something like that. Now, hopefully we understand what an HTTP request and the benefit of using this request. So right now, we're gonna see how we actually make those requests from our JavaScript code. And here is the Visual Studio Code text editor. And you can get that, and I will list the link down below. Or you can choose any your favorite editors if you want. Now, I have created index.html and it contains very basic HTML code. In the example, I would not use the web server to run, but by just load the file directly to the browser, and the browser will have to render HTML file and the JavaScript file. And down here, we're gonna link the JavaScript file that we're gonna write inside that file. And we have two ways to make the AJAX request. First, we're gonna do using Vanilla JavaScript without using any additional library. And then we're gonna use the jQuery methods to making this request. First of all, that we're gonna do is instance the XML HTTP request object. And now we're gonna store this in a variable that we're gonna say XHR equal to new XML in the capital letter and HTTP request in camel case like this. Now we have instanced the XML HTTP request object. And anyways, and nowadays all the modern browsers have built-in with this object. And this object allows us to make the HTTP request and exchange the data with the server. And now we store this in the object in the XHR variable, so we're gonna use this variable for reference. And this object reference holds a bunch of methods and properties. And we can use a few methods to make a request. Well, the first method that we're gonna use is open methods. And this method is used for setup the request. So this method can tell the JavaScript the type of the request that we want to talk to the server, which URL we want to request, whether we want to make async or synchronously. To do this, we're gonna call the reference hr.open. And the first argument that we need to pass is the type of the request, which is going to be a GET request. And the types of requests can be post, GET, put, PUT, and delete. And these HTTP verbs depend on which verb that your server accepts the request. Anyways, just remember that when we want to get the data, we use the GET request. And we're gonna put it as a string or a text. And then the second argument is the URL endpoint, which is the path that we want to retrieve the data from. Now, if we go back to the fake API website and go down here, we can choose one of these endpoints to match our GET request. If we hover on this, we're gonna see the link show on the bottom corner here. And we're gonna be using this link, so right click and copy link address. And then let's go back and paste inside the string again. The third parameter is the boolean value, means true or false. And that's telling whether we want to request asynchronous or synchronously. So it's true if we want to asynchronous and false if we want to synchronous. But now it deprecates if we use synchronous. So we don't need to pass that, and we use another overload method opened that support only 2 parameters. Alright, that's the first step to do. Now we just set up the request and telling what the type of request and where we want to send the request. But we're not yet telling the browser to send out and fetch the data yet. So to do that, we have to call another method by saying hr.send. Okay, now we have setting up and send the request. And then I'm gonna save this and open up the browser, go to the network tab here. And we're gonna click refresh the browser again. As we can see here, the request is made, and if we click here, we're gonna see those request information, which endpoint we have request, and the HTTP verb as the GET request. Now we go to the tab response, and we're gonna see the response data in the JSON format as expected. So everything is work fine, but how we can access those data? Now in our code, we can track those process and the response data with the event listener, which is called onReady state chain. And now we're gonna listen on the HTTP request by saying HHR.openReady state chain, write all in lowercase. And this listener will fire the function on every state of the request chain. By the way, the function here can be write in a traditional form like this function, or we can write in a short form, but I prefer the short form one because it's pretty clean. So in this function, there are 4 states in total. So we're gonna log those in the console. Now we're gonna say console.logs HHR, and this will show to us when the request state change. Now, when this code execute, it's gonna be open the request, then it's gonna be send that request to the server, and then on every request state change, it's gonna be log those out. Let me save it and come to console tab, and then we're gonna refresh the browser. And we can see here there are 4 logs, and inside those contain the property ready state, which have a different values, and for each value have a different meanings. For state number 1, it means that when we call the methods open to initiate the request, and the state 2 comes when the send method is called. And then the state number 3 means it is downloading the data until the state 4 comes to complete the final request. So in this state 4, it's very important that we can access the response data and do something with it. And if we expand this, we can see the properties named response text, which contain the response data from the server. As we can see here, this object contains a property ready state and the response text, so we can use those to capture data. Now we have an idea to deal with this. So inside this onReady state chain, we can say if HHR.ready state not equal to 4, and then we're gonna do nothing because those states that beside state number 4 are not ready to use the data. So let me return this back. And then below this statement, we can use the property response text because only state number 4 will execute this. Now we can say the console.logs and HHR.response text. That's the property which contains the text data. If we save this and go back to the browser, refresh again, and we're gonna see those data display out here as a text. So we have those data in our hand, and this is the JSON string, and we're gonna handle with this data in the future videos. But now let me finish some kind of problems will occur in this event listener first. In our code, we have prevents the other state beside the state number 4 to run this code line. And that is the request is completely done. But the problem is if some kind of error with the network request, or for example, there is an error from the server or our endpoint is incorrect, that still make the network request complete all the state chain. Means it still reach the state number 4, but we're gonna get an empty data. So let me demo an example. We're gonna add something in this endpoint to make a non-exist URL, and we should see an error. Okay, and we're gonna add the HHO objects into the console. Then let's resolve this first and come to the browser. Now we can see the highlight red color here, 404 error status, and the request objects over here. We also don't see the response text too, because the data that we expect is not going to respond. If we expand this object again, look at this, it is a status 404 and the response text is empty. Now we still pass the state number 4 and the code is still executed. So to handle this, we can check the condition combine these two properties, state ready and the status code. Actually, when we make the request data successful, we would return the 200 status, which means okay, there is no problem on the request and the server is response. And oppositely, the status 404 means there is no resource found, and we can check those status code in the Mozilla website that is going to be talk about HTTP response, which have some different range status, something like this. So you also can read this detail in this page too. And this 404 status code, it can be found in our browser too when we visit the resource that don't exist on the server. Now let's go back to our code, and here we have checked the ready state already. So we can check another if condition. So let's say if xhr.status not equal to 200, and then we're gonna do nothing and return back to prevent the execute code below. So let's rerun this again. Now as we see here, the code doesn't print out the request, instead showing only red highlight 404 here. So when the JavaScript execute in this state 1, 2, 3, that it will match this condition, and then it's gonna be returned back. In the state 4, the JavaScript will say, well, that's fine, and then it would go straight to the code below. And it will pass the condition because the state is 404, and then it's gonna be returned back. Now, if we want to display there is some problems when we request the data, then we can insert the log or alert between these two conditions. Let's say there is some things error. So let's save it, and we're gonna see those logs print out in the console. Now we have done on HTTP request in the vanilla JavaScript. So now let's jump a little bit to the jQuery AJAX request, which is more clean and easy to use. So let's grab this jQuery CDN clean in this website, and we're gonna click this to copy this script tag, and then just go back and paste about our script link. We paste about this link so that we can use the syntax jQuery in our code. Remember, the JavaScript code is run from top to bottom. Now let me move to the index.js, which we will write the AJAX inside that. We would clean this a little bit by comment this whole HTTP request, and the way we made the request network with the jQuery, just say $sign.ajax, and this is the methods that we will use now. And it's really nice, clean, so we don't need to take care of whole a bunch like this code. Now we just use only one method that we does all everything for us. Now in this parenthesis, we need to pass the JavaScript object, and basically it contains the URL endpoint, method, and two callback functions. One is the success and the other one is error. As we know, the JavaScript object format should have a key value in pairs. So this key endpoint is the URL, and then the value is the endpoint over here. So just copy that and paste over here. Then the next one is the methods that we're gonna make request. And this method by default is the get request. We can change to another HTTP verbs if we want. In HTTP request, we use event listener to listen all the request state that update. But now we're gonna be use the callback function, which is called success. That means when we success the request data, this function will fire and return the data via this argument, so that we can work on it. And for the last one is the error. If there is error in our request, and this function will fire and we can pass through three arguments. So first one is the jQuery HTTP request, second one is the status text of the error, and the last one is the error text. Now in this function, we're gonna log the data to see if it works. We're gonna save this and refresh the browser. Cool. We can see those data response as an object, means we have success request via the jQuery AJAX. Now I'm gonna say we need to walk before we learn how to run. What I mean is just keep in mind what you have learned using HTTP request by using a Vanilla JavaScript, because in a real project you maybe use another JS frameworks to help you to manipulate DOM or request the data. Alright guys, now we can make those requests via the native JavaScript and the jQuery. Hopefully you learned something, and the next video we're going to talk about JSON data. Otherwise, don't forget hit the subscribe and like it.